Hi, everybody. I'm Meteorologist Pat Cavlin coming to you from KHOU 11 in Houston, Texas with your Sunday, September 10th, 2023 tropical update. We are just going to focus on the latest with Hurricane Lee because that is the only feature in the tropical Atlantic that poses any threat to anybody here over the next 7 to 10 days. So first, where is the storm? Here it is right now. It's about 400 miles to the north and east of Puerto Rico. The storm is moving to the northwest, so it's moving away from the island. So this is not going to pose a threat in the near term to any of the Caribbean islands here. In fact, this storm is just going to continue to churn out here in open waters for the next few days. It's a powerful hurricane, though. It is a little bit weaker than it was at the end of last week, where it peaked at Category 5 status. As of this evening, it's a Category 3 storm, again with winds sustained at 120 miles per hour. But we are expecting this storm to strengthen through the overnight. We could see this make a run at Category 5 status again. But right now, the Hurricane Center keeps this as a Category 4 as we get into Monday and Tuesday with winds sustained at 130 miles per hour. And then from there, we see that turn that's been very well advertised to the north as we get into Tuesday, Wednesday. So sometime in that time frame, the storm is going to make that turn away from the U.S. and towards Bermuda. And then by Thursday and Friday, the storm makes a pass by Bermuda as a weakening hurricane. So notice, by Friday evening, the storm is an 80-mile-per-hour Category 1 hurricane. It either makes landfall in Bermuda or passes just to the west. And then, of course, the big question is, where does it go from there? A lot of possibilities that include the Northeast, New England, and the Canadian Maritimes. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I do want to focus on the strength first because we have been talking about how strong this storm is. Again, it reached Cat 5 status late last week. Now it's at Cat 3 status, expected to go back to a 4, but by the time it gets up towards Bermuda, it's weakening fast. So what gives? We talk all the time about water temperatures. That's the fundamental ingredient that you need for a tropical storm development. And the threshold that we typically use is 80-degree water. Now notice these lighter orange colors in here. That's actually the wake from the last system that went through this area. That actually, what happens is as tropical systems go over open waters, they churn things up. You get a lot of upwelling, and that pulls in colder water from deep down towards the surface. And so you actually see the temperatures. I mean, it's not cold water, but we are below that 80-degree threshold here out towards Bermuda. Around it, though, we do have 80-degree temperatures. And then once you get above that line, look at that, up into New England, mid-60-degree water temperatures. So let's talk about that line first, that dark strip of red here across the North Atlantic. That is the Gulf Stream that originates down in the Florida Straits from the Gulf of Mexico and then comes all the way up the East Coast and snakes its way out across the North Atlantic. And the water temperatures within the Gulf Stream are above that 80-degree threshold. So we're talking about 82, 83, 84-degree water temperatures. But to the north of that, we've got water temperatures that are not sustaining for tropical systems in the 60s and 70s, even lower 60s up towards Halifax and Nova Scotia, and then to the south of it again, tropical waters. So this is going to be a big obstacle for this storm to overcome as it goes up in latitude. It's going to start to encounter colder water temperatures. Of course, that is going to help to weaken the system. That's not the only thing that we look at, though. We also look at wind shear, and that's going to be a big player in this forecast. Not much wind shear to deal with until it makes that turn to the north, and then all of a sudden the storm encounters these really strong upper level winds, which you know as the jet stream. It is that time of year now as we start to get into meteorological fall that we get bigger cold fronts coming into the northeast, and those are attached to the jet stream, which, you know, features winds that are upwards of 100 to 150 miles per hour. That is going to rip this thing apart. There's a caveat, though. Even though jet stream winds can help to rip a storm apart, it can also help it become extra tropical. And when that happens, the wind field with these storms expands greatly. And that means that a storm doesn't have to be close to land to lead to bigger impacts. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind as we watch the progression of this storm over the next few days. So again, the Forecast cone right now cuts off around Bermuda. Let's talk about where it goes from there. And for that, we're going to use our model plots. You know these as spaghetti models because it looks like a bunch of spaghetti just thrown on the map. So there's Bermuda there, that little speck on the map. And you can see pretty good agreement with the models there, taking this storm just to the west of Bermuda. But again, Bermuda not out of the woods yet, could be dealing with a strong Category 1 or 2 hurricane. But it's really after Bermuda, as we get into New England, that the possibility envelope really starts to widen here. And that's where the concern comes into play. You've probably been seeing this all over social media. Big hurricane headed for the Northeast, big storm headed for New England. And that's just not the case because right now we can't say for certain what this storm is going to do because it's still 7 days out. So the landfall location of whatever this storm ends up being is still very uncertain. But again, big range of possibilities here from Long Island into New England, into the Gulf of Maine, and into the Canadian Maritimes. So all of these areas have to keep a very close eye on this forecast as we get to the upcoming week because there's still a big range of possibilities. So let's talk about individual models. This is going to be a scary solution here for anyone that lives in New England because this solution of the GFS American computer model, this is clickbait. This is internet clickbait because someone will post this on Twitter or Facebook and they won't give you any context. They'll just say big hurricane headed into New England as we get to the middle part of September. Here's the context that you need. This will change. This is guaranteed to change. Anytime you see one run of a computer model, take it with a grain of salt, especially look at how far out we are. September 16th, are you kidding me? That's 6 days from now. So much can change. There's a lot of variables at play, and this is just one model solution. But the reason I'm showing it to you is twofold. One, look at how big that wind field is. All the way from New York City across. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of miles in terms of a wind field. That couples with what I said earlier, that these storms, as they become extratropical in nature, they really start to expand in size. And so the impacts really start to pull away from the center. The other thing that I want to talk about is just the fact that this is a possibility. It's not a guarantee and it's not a forecast. It's what one model thinks might happen. Here's another model solution, the European model, which everyone knows has a pretty good track record with these systems. This takes the center of the storm 250 miles to the southeast of Boston. This is why we don't just show you one model because there's a lot of different solutions. That being said, there's a lot of different possibilities which these two different model solutions are showing us, and that's why we can't let our guard down right now. But I definitely think here, coastal New England, you got to keep your guard up here as we get to the end of the week and into next weekend because at the very least you could be seeing a very powerful nor'easter-like storm, right? Big surf, gusty winds, a lot of rain, but it does have a tropical component to it, although I do think it quickly loses those tropical characteristics by the time it gets here. So this will likely be a Category 1 hurricane by the time it gets to this latitude. And exactly where it goes, whether it's out to sea or somewhere into New England, that's the big question that remains to be seen. But it's going to be a powerful storm here for New England. I guarantee we're going to see rough surf, we're going to see rip currents, we're going to see beach erosion, probably some coastal flooding. That you don't need a landfall for. That you just need a big storm a couple hundred miles offshore to do. So that is pretty much a guarantee here as we get to the end of the week. So bottom line, as we look ahead over the next 5 to 7 days, anywhere from the Canadian Maritimes down through coastal New England, even into South Jersey and into Long Island, you got to keep a very close eye on this forecast. Again, whether this thing goes out to sea or does that hook, we are expecting coastal impacts. So coastal communities especially got to keep a close eye on this. But beyond that, in terms of a landfalling tropical or post-tropical system with gusty winds and heavy rain, just keep an eye on the forecast here from Atlantic City all the way up through New England and into the Canadian Maritimes because, by the way, today, September 10th, marks the climatological peak of hurricane season. So we are at the very top of what we typically see in terms of activity, historically speaking. We will stay in this climatological peak probably through the middle of October, so another about 5 to 6 weeks here of historically high activity. That's typically what we see, and then things really start to drop off. Hurricane season, though, doesn't end until November 30th. So that is your no hype latest on Hurricane Lee here from Houston, Texas. We'll be doing more updates on this storm as we go through the week.